Welcome to Let's Talk Learning Technology. Do you know the latest in learning technology? Matt and Walter do. From learning authoring tools and animation to virtual reality and everything in between, innovative learning groups Matt Kurtin and Walter Schirmacher geek out on all of it. Get their perspectives on the latest trends, tips and tricks, and recommendations so your learning tech keeps up with the times.
Hello and welcome everyone to Let's Talk Learning Technology, which we affectionately refer to as LT Squared. I'm Matt Kurtin, the Senior Director of Technology and Visual Design at Innovative Learning Group.
And I'm Walter Schirmacher, a programmer at ILG. With us today are ILG graphic designers, media developers, and animators, Zach Swisher and Eris Noren.
Hello.
Hi, nice to be here.
In today's episode, we're going to be talking about tools used in animation, where ideas come from, and best practices for using animation in learning. I'd like to start out with finding out a little bit about how you all got started creating animations. Eris, I'll start with you.
Yeah, what a great question, Matt. Thanks. Well, I think I'll skip the times talking about making the flip books as a kid, and we'll jump into some more robust tools. I think for me, it started right after the internet got popular. I started working in e-learning, and if you remember back at that time, very soon after websites, Flash came along, and along with that, many websites had the Flash intros. And then that was followed very closely by the skip intro button, which was our first example of how to use animation judiciously and to use it in the correct context. And I'm a believer in that. And I think there's a definite place in e-learning for animation and video, but it has to be aligned with the learning objectives. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, I remember at that time when Flash first came out, it was actually called Future Splash Animator for a little while before Flash, and I was looking at using it as interaction design and development too for e-learning at that time. How about you, Zach? How did you get started? I know you kind of came from the graphic design first and worked your way into animation.
Right. It's kind of a similar story. Really just, being a designer and everything, I feel like, especially nowadays, you have to have some sort of a working knowledge at the very minimum, at least how to operate in that world. But yeah, I started with Flash 2. That seems like forever ago, and it seems like I'm dating myself a little bit, but that's kind of where I got my start, and then it's just kind of carried off into there. But really, I'm coming at it from more of a graphic design perspective.
And Zach, what is one of your favorite animation tools to use?
It really depends on what the need is. I think a couple of go-tos, at least that we use here quite often. Beyond is a very, very efficient time-saving tool to use. As far as actual control, After Effects would definitely be the go-to as far as importing different Illustrator assets and just all kinds of things.
As Zach mentioned Beyond and After Effects, and I know you've done work in both of those tools. Do you have another favorite tool, or what's your favorite tool? Maybe it is one of those two.
Well, I would say for any serious animation, probably After Effects would be the go-to tool for that. Yeah, there are, although the landscape is changing, and there are several new customizable animation tools like Beyond or Video Scribe that have a lot of the assets and typography and pre-generated movements already embedded in the program, so you kind of just drag and drop. So I see the world heading in that direction. I guess it depends on how much originality and the time frame and some of the constraints like that.
But what if you're thinking about 2D versus 3D? I know in 3D there's probably going to be different tools that you use as well.
Well, it's interesting in a 3D program like Cinema 4D, besides making a model or models or a scene, your camera is right in the 3D program. And you can have multiple cameras, you can move them, you can animate them. So within the 3D environment, it's very easy to animate almost anything and then just export it as a video file. So that's a big part of it. Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's very exciting to me, not only from where you might start with a 3D and flatten it for a display in an e-learning, but also how that 3D animation might be used in AR and VR. It's definitely exciting coming up. So that's great.
That's going to be the future for sure.
So I'm always curious, how do you normally start an animation? I mean, I get stuck looking at that blank canvas. So, like, what is your process? Like, do you sketch something? Do you look around for inspiration? Like, what do you do?
Usually it's long talks with the client to see what we're actually going for to begin with. I usually like to start with either some sort of storyboard, sketching it out, doing some sort of cells, kind of showing scene progress. But again, it depends on what the client wants and what the need is. Eris, what do you usually...
I think you hit the nail on the head, Zach. I think it starts with defining where this animation or, at the end it's going to be a video. It's going to be a video file, whether we call it animation or not. So at the end, where is this going to go to? How big is it? And then once we get the script, sometimes I'd say about 80% of the time the client will have notes in the script for character ideas, for colors, that sort of thing. And if they have that, that's a great starting point. If they don't, then it's time to get the sketch pad. I like to use the drawing app on my iPad with the Apple Pencil called Procreate. You can easily draw things there, and that's a good starting point to get them into an animation quickly.
I think one of the things that's interesting about video is there's really both an art and a science part to it. Obviously, if you don't have the creativity, you're not going to have a good result. But once that part gets done, there's still things like the compression to worry about, which really are a technical concern to make sure that you can deliver it in an e-learning and you don't lose the quality in the compression. I was wondering, Walter, in terms of going into Adobe Media Encoder, if you have kind of target settings that you go for e-learning in order to make it compressed properly.
Yeah, I do have a set of defaults I use. It depends on the client. Sometimes clients will have specifics they want, but if they don't, usually I'll go for like 1,000 kilobytes or 0.9 to get close. And for audio, it ranges between like 56 and 128 kilobytes per second, just for a good audio quality. If you get much below that, you're starting to get like below CD quality, and it starts sounding really radio-y and tinny.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that we want to aim for is to make sure that the size is as small as we can get it without losing the quality where it begins to look or sound bad. We want to avoid messing it up. Otherwise, let's make it as small as we can. A couple of tips. If you have a video that doesn't have audio in it, it's better to take out the audio than to leave it in and then put it into Storyline and put it as mute. Because if you have the audio track in there and it's not being used, you're just wasting bandwidth. Another one is a tool that I think you shared with me, Walter, AVI Demux, which will allow you to go in and replace audio in a video, take it out and replace it with other audio without having to recompress the video, which is great for preserving the quality. And I know there's other tools you've mentioned to me, like Handbrake and things like that as well. Are there other tools that you use on the compressing or editing side, kind of on the technical side rather than the creative?
Media Encoder is my main go-to right now. Beyond that, Handbrake is a really good one when it comes to compression. If I encounter a video, usually when we end up with some really old video, something that was flash encoded or something, and Media Encoder just rejects it, then I'll go back to Handbrake or something similar. There's some spin-offs from Handbrake, and one of those usually can get it into a format we actually can deal with. I think the main thing with that is not compressing it too much before you have to work on it. Unless you have to. Like if it's in a really ancient Flash format or something similar and there's just no way to import it into Premiere or After Effects or something, sometimes you have to recompress it because you just don't have a choice. And then, of course, there's the ultimate save. If you can't get it compressed and can't get it imported, if you can at least get it to play, you can always do a screen capture and re-record it. But that's like a last save if we need to. So, hey, man, while we're talking about compression, Matt, what are your thoughts on like variable compression versus constant bit rate?
So typically I will use variable compression and 2 passes in order to have a chance to kind of optimize quality in various parts rather than assuming everything needs to be compressed equally the same. However, I have found depending on the computer, if you have hardware compression, sometimes you can't use the variable bitrate in 2 passes, and you can save a considerable amount of time on a long video if you can use hardware compression instead of software compression. So I might sometimes try the single pass constant bit rate first and see if that's fine before going back and applying the normal variable and 2 pass. I use Camtasia quite a bit myself for screen recording and screen capturing, and that has a capability, some animations. But it's interesting to me that in talking about the tools you use, nobody mentioned Adobe Premiere, as that's quite a well-known and common tool. But it may be because you kind of have it covered, or because we're talking more about animations instead of just plain straight video editing, which maybe that's when
Right. I mean, I definitely use Premiere quite a bit, but like you're saying, Matt, it's more of when you're dealing with raw footage or, stock videos and things like that. That's where I would kind of take that to. I think they do incorporate really well together, After Effects and Premiere, but as far as just straight up animating, I would say After Effects is definitely the go-to there.
So turning back to the creative part, I guess I'll put this to you again, Zach, of where do you draw inspiration from for creative ideas? And it could be whether it was for graphics or animation, it's the same, or maybe you need different sources when you've got that motion going.
Right. I mean, for me, typically, and unfortunately, this doesn't always align with all businesses and all of our clients, but I've always been a really big fan of cartoons. Still now, I'm like a large child. I love cartoons. And I also used to collect comic books when I was younger, so I do illustrate on the side as well. So I think a lot of my inspiration does come from that, as far as the colors, the line work. I'm really drawn to that stuff. So I think it incorporates really well into the animations we do, and it teaches you a little bit of a base level of physics, character movement, and things like that.
Eris, same question to you. Where do you draw inspiration from?
That's funny that Zach talked about the cartoons, because I think quite often clients usually bring up the ABC, what was it, the Schoolhouse Rock, which is funny because they're so long ago, but they're still ingrained in people's, we got to make it like that. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. But, for me, I got to say one of the spots I go to is the client's branding book. I find if I can see their colors and their fonts and their styles, a lot of people say that limits you, but I think that kind of, in a way, it also frees you, because you can say, okay, these are the colors that I need to stick with. This is kind of the style that we're going to go for. So there's one of the go-to points would be that. And then, like Zach, I like to keep my eye on the latest things in the world, looking at cool websites and whatever, commercials and ads and things that you see everywhere. And if it's something that looks useful, I for sure will make a note of it, at least mentally, and it might pop up down the road in a video somewhere.
Talking about Schoolhouse Rock, that reminds me, one of the ways to really enhance an animation I've always found is the music or the sound you put in it. And you can take something that could be a really simple animation and really make it something special based on what kind of audio you do or don't use in it. I mean, what do you guys think about using audio and music and sounds in animations?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it adds so much.
It's really crucial. I mean, even just the tone of a character's voice. I mean, it's like we've seen people that either annoy us, characters that annoy us, or characters that we just love, and a lot of it can be based off of tone. Music can set a really big atmosphere, too, as far as just the mood you're trying to set. Is it a serious thing? Is it something that's a little bit more funny and campy? Is it just kind of in the background? You really can set a tone.
All right, well, let's bring this back around to the learning itself, because really the reason why we're creating these animations is in service of helping people really learn. So I think, what do you see as the best practices for how to use animation appropriately in e-learning particularly, or in learning particularly, versus marketing or advertising or whatever else you might use it for?
I think one of the things is to make sure that it aligns with the learning objectives, and the learning objectives themselves. We need to make sure that we're solving the problem for the client, and that e-learning is the right tool. If we've decided e-learning is the right tool and this web-delivered course is the right tool, then video can enhance that. And I think there are for sure studies that say, reading, people remember this much if they read it. If they watch a video, they remember this much. And if they watch the video and then practice it themselves, it's, this number grows for each one of those. So I think the right use of sound and motion and interaction can enhance the learning process.
I know one of the things that we worked on together recently, we had a video playing, but we had questions embedded in the video. While the video was playing, it would reach a certain point, and it would look like you're still in the video, but you could answer the questions, and then the video would continue. And I really like the way that we got the interactivity right in the video without breaking the flow of the video, but yet still giving the user a chance to practice.
Yeah, that's almost shocking, isn't it, to have a video just all of a sudden things appear that you can click and drag and drop and interact with, but you're more or less still in the video. And that's probably indicative of the future, too. I think we'll see more of that. Yeah, that was a great project.
So what type of advice would you give to an instructional designer who's trying to get started with video that maybe doesn't have the skills that you all have, of what tool to start with or what they should keep in mind?
I mean, as far as tools go, I would say Vyond is a really good one. It's very, very easy and straightforward. It just would be a good way to just kind of just dabble in it a little bit. They have characters built in there for you. It just is a good way to kind of introduce you to the idea of timelines, adding audio, mixing it with stock footage. That would probably be a really good go-to. Watching YouTube videos too on just all these different tools is also an excellent way to just kind of see what's going on behind the scenes too.
So let me adjust that question slightly, and I'll put it to you this time, Eris. What about if an instructional designer is writing scripts? What kind of tips do you have to help them write a script that makes it more helpful for you as an animator versus less helpful in terms of how you collaborate with them to get the information you need?
Well, if the instructional designer is writing the script, the number one golden rule is less bullet points. IDs seem to love bullet points, and the script will be filled with them unless you can get them to... Now, I'm kind of joking on that, but really there's not everything needs to be a bullet point. One thing is to try to think about how we can visualize these segmented chunks of text into a different visually somehow can show up different on the screen would be a big one. And then for the IDs, I would say don't overthink it. A lot of times you'll get a script, it'll be a 2-column Word document with the narration on the left and the right, they're visual ideas, and they seem to some of them spend an inordinate amount of time trying to come up with ideas, and it's like, you don't have to do that. Let the visual guys do that. That's the whole reason we're here, is to take these words and come up with creative images and motion and movement. And so I think part of it would be to learn when to let go.
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying have them bring the content, but let you bring the creativity. And sometimes if it's overthought, it kind of constrains on what you would do. And certainly in a script, you can't represent everything that's going to happen in the animation on the screen, so you're going to get a better view of what it's like if you're prototyping or creating the ideas in the animation tool than trying to represent that in a Word document. So that definitely makes sense to me.
If you could go back in time and give yourself a piece of advice for creating animations for your younger self, what would it be? Zach, what would you tell yourself?
Oh wow. Don't dive so hard into Flash, maybe? I don't no, I don't know. I feel like I don't know if there'd be really anything. Just keep learning, I guess. Because really, everyone starts somewhere, and I'm probably not the proudest of some of the first things I did in Flash, years and years ago. But it's a learning process. So I just keep learning, I think, would be the advice.
And Eris, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, man. Well, I guess I would have to say that when I was in college, I didn't do very well in my computer class. And I was a diehard illustrator, painter, carried the sketchbook and the pencils. And I maybe wouldn't have resisted computer so much because once I started building e-learning and animations, I loved it. And I thought, wow, this is the way to go. Why was I such a holdout?
All right. Well, I feel like this has been a great conversation, and I'll also say a wide-ranging conversation. We've touched on a lot of topics here. Thank you, Eris and Zach, and thank you, Walter.
Oh, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
If you want to learn more about animation, we've posted some resources at the bottom of this episode's page. And if you have any learning technology topics that you'd like for us to talk about, Walter and I are on Twitter, and you can also send us an email at marketing@innovativelg.com.
Thank you for listening. Tune in next time as we'll be talking about learning delivery and tracking systems.